The day I found out my husband had drained our joint savings account, I was lying in a hospital bed, hooked up to a morphine drip, waiting to hear whether my biopsy results were going to change the rest of my life. He didn't even visit. He said the traffic on I-95 was bad. I want you to sit with that for a second, because I still do. Every single morning when I pour my coffee and look out at the backyard of the house that is now legally, entirely, beautifully mine, I sit with it. Not out of bitterness, not anymore. But because I need to remember how close I came to letting that man convince me that I was the problem. My name is irrelevant. What matters is that this happened, that it was real, and that if any part of what I'm about to tell you sounds familiar, I need you to keep listening. Because the ending, I promise you, the ending is worth it. Part 1, The Man I Married. Let me take you back to 2009. Barack Obama had just been inaugurated, everyone was terrified about the economy, and I was 34 years old, working as a hospital administrator in suburban Connecticut, convinced that my life was finally clicking into place. I met Daniel at a fundraiser for a children's literacy nonprofit. He was charming in that specific, dangerous way, the kind of charm that doesn't announce itself loudly but rather seeps into your bones slowly, like a slow leak you don't notice until the ceiling collapses. He asked thoughtful questions. He remembered details. He showed up, consistently, at exactly the right moments. We dated for 2 years. I was careful. I'd been through a painful divorce in my late 20s, and I had rules. I had a therapist. I had a whole infrastructure of self-protection. And then Daniel, piece by piece, dismantled all of it. Not aggressively, that's the thing. He was patient. He used love as a solvent. We married in 2011. Small ceremony, backyard of his parents' place in Westport. There's a photo from that day, me in a cream dress, laughing at something he said, completely unguarded, completely gone. Every time I see that photo now, I think, she has no idea. The first 3 years were good. Genuinely good. I don't want to revise history and pretend there were warning signs I ignored, because honestly, there weren't, or they were so subtle I'd have needed a microscope. He was attentive. He helped with chores. He came to my mother's chemotherapy appointments. He made my friends laugh. He was also, it would turn out, systematically learning exactly who I was, my fears, my loyalties, my pressure points, the way a locksmith studies a mechanism. Not to cherish me. To use me. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Part 2, The Diagnosis. In the spring of 2019, I found a lump. I know. I know that phrase is in every story like this, every woman's story, and I hate that it's in mine too, but there it is. March 12, 2019. In the shower, on a Tuesday morning, before work. The next 8 weeks were a blur of appointments, biopsies, second opinions, insurance pre-authorizations, and waiting. The particular cruelty of medical waiting that anyone who's been through it understands, that limbo where time feels both suspended and accelerating, where every ordinary moment has this strange, heightened quality, like you're photographing it just in case. I was terrified. Of course I was. But I also had a plan. Because here's the thing, I was a hospital administrator. I understood the system. And for years, because I understood it, I had quietly, carefully, been building a separate medical savings fund. Not a standard HSA, something more robust. Cash savings, specifically earmarked for any major health crisis that insurance might not fully cover. Procedures, specialists out of network, experimental treatments if it came to that. Complementary therapies. Lost income during recovery. Childcare if I needed help. It wasn't a fortune, but it was significant. Over 6 years, I had accumulated $47,000 in a savings account that was in both our names, because at the time I'd set it up, it had seemed like the right thing to do. The married thing. The trusting thing. $47,000. I need to say that number out loud because it matters. Because that was 6 years of strategic, disciplined, terrified saving by a woman who had watched her own mother struggle through cancer and vowed never to be financially helpless in a medical crisis. Daniel knew exactly what that account was for. We had discussed it many times. He had said, and I remember this with such specific, burning clarity, he had said, more than once, that money is your armor, babe. Nobody touches that. Nobody touches that. Part 3, The Lie with a Paper Trail. My biopsy results came back on a Friday afternoon. Early stage. Treatable. Terrifying, but survivable. My oncologist used the word excellent regarding my prognosis, and I sat in her office and cried in a way I hadn't cried since my father died, not from grief, but from the specific, bone-deep relief of being allowed to stay. I called Daniel from the parking garage. He said, "Oh, thank God," and his voice broke, and I believed him. I want to be clear about that, in that moment, I believed him completely. The following Monday, I began making calls to arrange my treatment. Lumpectomy, radiation, possibly hormonal therapy for several years. All manageable. All expensive, even with good insurance. I opened my laptop to transfer money from the medical savings account to our checking account so I could cut a check to a specialist I'd chosen. The account showed a balance of $214. Not $47,000. Not $30,000. Not even $5,000. $214. I refreshed the page. I checked the account number. I called the bank. And the very polite, very careful customer service representative told me that over the preceding 14 months, the account had been systematically withdrawn in amounts between $800 and $2,900, always below $3,000, which, if you know banking, you know is not a coincidence. That's structuring. That's someone who looked up how to avoid triggering federal reporting thresholds. 43 withdrawals. 14 months. And each one had been made by Daniel, using his authorized access to our joint account. I sat at my kitchen table for, I don't know how long. An hour, maybe. The refrigerator hummed. The neighbor's dog barked. Afternoon light moved across the floor in that slow, indifferent way it always does. And I thought, he planned this. He planned this while we were eating dinner together. While he was driving me to appointments. While he was saying that money is your armor, babe. He had looked at the woman he married, the woman who had just been diagnosed with cancer, and he had stolen her armor. And then I called my sister. And I said nothing. Because I was already thinking. Part 4, The Performance. Here is what I did not do. I did not confront him immediately. I did not cry, or scream, or throw his things into the front yard, which, believe me, every single cell in my body was voting for. Instead, I called my friend Renata, who is a family law attorney and also the most strategically intelligent person I have ever met in my life. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, which is how you know someone is actually processing and not just waiting to speak. When I finished, she said, "Okay. Here's what you're going to do." She walked me through everything. Document everything first. Copy every bank statement, every withdrawal record. Get your name off anything you can quietly get it off of. See a forensic accountant. Don't tip him off. And start keeping a log. Then she said something that I want you to hear very carefully, because it changed everything. Don't mourn yet. That comes later. Right now, you have a job to do. So I did my job. For the next 6 weeks, while I underwent surgery and began radiation, I also became the most composed, collected, strategically functioning version of myself I have ever been. It was, in a horrible way, clarifying, the way extreme cold is clarifying. You stop feeling your extremities and you focus on your core. Daniel, to his credit, played his part beautifully during this period. He was attentive. He held my hand at appointments. He made soup. He posted on Facebook about his brave, incredible wife, and people left heart emojis in the comments. Mutual friends told me how lucky I was. I smiled. I said thank you. And every night after he fell asleep, I sat at the desk in our spare bedroom and I built my case. Here's what I found, and I want to be precise, because precision matters. The $43,000 had gone primarily to 3 places. First, a down payment on a condo in Stamford. A 2-bedroom condo that was titled solely in Daniel's name, that I had known nothing about. Second, a joint investment account, joint between Daniel and a woman named Christine, whose last name I recognized. She had been at our wedding. She had given us a Vitamix. Third, assorted cash withdrawals, hotel stays, restaurant charges in cities Daniel claimed to have visited for work. Christine, who had given us a Vitamix. I had actually used that blender. I had made smoothies in it. Post-surgery, trying to keep my strength up, I had made smoothies in a blender purchased by my husband's mistress as a gift to our marriage, which he was simultaneously destroying. I'd like to say I'm above finding that detail darkly funny. I'm not. I absolutely am not. Part 5. What 14 months of deception looks like. Let me tell you what I learned about Daniel during those 6 weeks of digging, because this is the part that will make you feel something. Maybe anger. Maybe recognition. Maybe that specific nausea that comes from seeing someone clearly for the first time. Daniel, I discovered, was a fundamentally ordinary man who had developed an extraordinary talent for managing narratives. He had not married me for love, exactly, or rather, love had been present, but only as a tool. What he had really married me for was stability. I had the better income. I had the better career trajectory. I had the professional network, the health insurance, the 401k, the credit score. I was, in the most clinical possible sense, a resource. And when Christine, who was 8 years younger than me, who worked in his office, who had fewer complications and no medical crisis and presumably a fully intact medical savings account, when Christine became more appealing, Daniel hadn't made a decision so much as executed a transition plan. He needed capital to set up his new life. He needed time for the plan to develop without interference. And he had accurately calculated that I was unlikely to check the balance of a savings account I thought of as untouchable emergency money. Why would I look? It was for emergencies. And the emergency hadn't happened yet. Until it had. There was one more thing I found. A thing I almost missed, buried in an email account he used for financial documents, an account I was able to access only because he had used my laptop once and forgotten to sign out, and I had never deleted the browser session. A message from a mortgage broker. Dated 11 months earlier. Referencing the timeline for Daniel's transition. Including a phrase that I will quote exactly because it is branded into my memory permanently. Once your wife's health situation becomes public, the sympathy narrative should work in your favor during the proceedings. The sympathy narrative. He had been planning to use my cancer diagnosis as a public relations strategy in our divorce. He had looked at my biopsy results and thought, timing. I'm going to give you a moment here, because I needed one too. Okay. Here's where I have to be honest with you, because I promised honesty. When I read that email, I felt something shift inside me that I can only describe as a load-bearing wall coming down. Not collapsing, coming down deliberately, like a controlled demolition. Something that had been holding a certain amount of ceiling dropped away, and what was left was just foundation. Clear and cold and very, very stable. I printed the email. I put it in the folder with everything else. And I went to bed. Part 6, the conversation that ended everything. 6 weeks into my radiation treatment, I asked Daniel to sit down with me after dinner. I had set the table carefully. I had made the lamb chops he liked, which in retrospect is either deeply symbolic or just practical. I'd had the lamb in the freezer and I wasn't going to waste good meat on drama. I poured him a glass of wine. I poured myself water, because alcohol and radiation don't mix well, which is one of approximately 900 things he hadn't thought to ask about during my treatment. I put a manila folder on the table between us. He looked at it. He looked at me. And I saw it, just for a second, before he rearranged his face, I saw the recognition. He knew. On some level, he had always known this moment was possible. "I'd like to talk about the medical savings account," I said. And he did something that I will never forget as long as I live. He sighed. Not a guilty sigh, a frustrated one. The sigh of a man who had expected more time. "Carol," he said, "not my name, but let's use it, I can explain." "I know," I said. "But I'd rather you listen." He did. I walked him through every withdrawal. Every date. Every amount. The condo. Christine. The investment account in both their names. The mortgage broker's email with the phrase sympathy narrative. I laid it all out, quietly, in order, the way you would present a case, because that's exactly what it was. He tried, briefly, to gaslight me, said some of the withdrawals were for investments in our future, said Christine was complicated, said the email had been taken out of context. He said these things in the tired, unconvincing way of someone who knows the game is over but hasn't gotten the message to his mouth yet. I let him finish. Then I said, "Renata is filing Monday morning. The forensic accountant has already submitted his report. The bank has flagged the structuring pattern as potential fraud, and I have an appointment with their legal department next Thursday. The condo is marital property regardless of whose name is on it, because it was purchased with marital funds. You have until Sunday to arrange somewhere to stay." He stared at me. "I'm still in radiation," I added. "So I'd appreciate it if we kept this civil, because I'm genuinely tired and I need my energy for recovery. But I want to be very clear, I'm not asking. I'm informing." He left that night. Took 2 bags and his laptop. Called me 3 times from the driveway, which I did not answer. Texted me 17 times over the following week, which my attorney answered on my behalf. The lamb chops, for the record, were excellent. Part 7, The Machinery of Justice, which is slow, and worth it. I want to be honest with you about the next part, because the internet loves a story where justice arrives swiftly and completely and with a satisfying click. Real life is messier. Real life involves 18 months of legal proceedings, an attorney who charged $375 an hour, days when I wondered if the fight was worth the cost of fighting it, and one very bad Tuesday in November when I sat in my car in the parking lot of the Whole Foods and cried for 45 minutes because I was exhausted and my arm hurt from a blood draw and I just wanted someone to tell me it was going to be okay. But here is what is also true. The legal system, when you have documentation and a good attorney and the particular advantage of your husband having committed what a judge would later describe as a systematic and deliberate breach of fiduciary duty within the marriage, the legal system eventually does its job. Renata was meticulous. The forensic accountant was meticulous. And Daniel, it turned out, was not actually as clever as he believed. The structuring of the withdrawals, rather than protecting him, actually added a layer of legal exposure because it suggested intent to conceal. His attorney advised him, eventually, that going to trial would be significantly worse than settling. The settlement included the house, in full, transferred to my name, with the mortgage refinanced in my name only. A cash settlement representing the $43,000 plus interest, drawn from the liquidation of the Stamford condo, which, yes, was indeed classified as marital property, funded by marital assets, regardless of whose name was on the deed. A portion of his retirement accounts. And a formal acknowledgement, in the settlement documents, that he had committed waste of marital assets, which matters both legally and, I'll admit, personally. He also had to give back the Vitamix. I'm kidding. I kept the Vitamix. It makes excellent smoothies and I refuse to let a blender defeat me. Part 8, What Nobody Tells You About Winning. I want to talk about the part that came after, because I think this is the part that matters most, and it's the part that stories like mine usually skip. I won. By almost any measurable standard, I won. I have the house. I have the settlement. I completed my radiation treatment successfully, my follow-up scans have been clean, and my oncologist used the word excellent again at my last appointment, this time without the terrifying context. I have my health, my home, my career, my friends, and a divorce attorney I will recommend to literally anyone who asks. And for a while, a significant while, I still felt like I had lost something that no legal document could return. Not Daniel. I want to be clear, I did not miss Daniel. What I grieved was the version of myself that had trusted him completely. The woman in the cream dress, laughing in the backyard, completely unguarded. She was not stupid or naive, she was a person who loved someone and believed they were loved in return. Grieving her felt important. It felt like a debt I owed her. I also grieved, more than I expected, the particular loneliness of being sick and fighting a legal battle simultaneously. There were appointments I went to alone because I was furious and proud and not yet ready to ask for help. There were nights when the house felt enormous and the silence had a specific texture that I would not wish on anyone. But here's what I want you to hear, and this is the part one mean the most. The same capacity that allowed Daniel to systematically study and exploit my vulnerabilities, the same careful attention to detail, the same strategic patience, those were qualities he had learned, at least in part, by watching me. Because I am a person who pays attention. I am a person who plans. I am a person who, when I decide something needs to be done, builds a folder, gathers evidence, and presents a case. He used what he learned from me against me. And then I used it to take my life back. That is not a small thing. I want you to sit with that. Part 9, Christine. I know you're wondering. I would wonder too. I'll tell you what happened to Christine, because it's relevant, and because it is one of those moments where reality outdoes any plot I could have written. Daniel moved into Christine's apartment in Stamford after the condo was liquidated. They were together for approximately 8 months. During that time, I'm told, and this comes from a mutual friend who felt it was information I deserved, Daniel began to exhibit many of the same behaviors with Christine that I now recognize as his methodology, the careful attention, the charm, the slow infiltration of her finances. Apparently he had suggested they open a joint investment account. She declined. Apparently she had heard the story. Our story. The full version, not the brave wife, terrible timing version he had been performing for mutual acquaintances. She declined, and then she ended the relationship, and I understand she sent me a card. A handwritten card, which my sister accepted on my behalf because I was not ready to open it. It sat on my kitchen counter for 3 weeks. When I finally opened it, it said, "I'm sorry for everything I was part of, even the parts one didn't know about. I hope your health is good. You deserved better." I read it several times. I felt many things in sequence: anger, sympathy, something close to kinship, and finally, unexpectedly, a kind of exhausted peace. She had also been, in her own way, managed by the same man. Her choices were her own, and they had consequences, and she had apparently reckoned with them. I didn't write back. But I kept the card. Part 10, the morning after everything. It is a Saturday morning in early autumn as I'm recording this. The light in this kitchen is extraordinary. I have always loved the way it comes through the east window around 8 o'clock, when the angle is still low and everything turns amber. It hits the tile backsplash in a way that makes the whole room glow. When Daniel and I bought this house, one of the things I loved most was this exact view, at this exact hour. He did not share that love. He was a late sleeper. This kitchen in the morning was always mine. Now the whole house is mine, in every legal and literal sense. The mortgage is in my name. The deed is in my name. The Vitamix is mine. The amber morning light is mine. I am 50 years old. I am in remission. I have a good job, a good attorney I no longer need, a garden I've been expanding in the backyard, and a dog named Francis who is currently destroying a chew toy with an enthusiasm I find personally inspiring. I am not the woman in the cream dress, laughing completely unguarded. I don't think I will be again, and I'm not sure I would choose to be. She was beautiful and she was real and she didn't deserve what happened to her. But she didn't have this kitchen to herself at 8 in the morning, with the amber light and the dog and the knowledge, the absolute bone-deep knowledge, that there is no one in this house who does not want to be here. That is worth something. That is worth quite a lot. The part 1 need you to hear. If you are listening to this right now, and something in it sounds familiar, not the specific details, maybe, but the structure of it, the careful love that turns out to be steady, the trust that gets quietly liquidated while you're not watching, the moment when the thing you most feared, illness, loss, failure, arrives, and you discover simultaneously that the person who promised to be your safety net has been selling it. I need you to know a few things. First, you are not stupid for having trusted. Trust is not a flaw. The flaw belongs to the person who exploited it. Second, the most dangerous thing that happened to me was not the diagnosis, and it was not losing $43,000. The most dangerous thing was the months before I found the folder, when I was operating on the assumption that I was safe, when I was allocating my emotional energy based on incomplete information. Information is protection. Understanding what is actually happening to you, as clearly and precisely as you can see it, is the first step toward changing it. Third, you are allowed to be strategic. I have had people, well-meaning people, suggest that my response to Daniel was cold, that I should have confronted him emotionally first, that something was lost by treating my marriage like a legal problem. And I understand that instinct. But what I know is this: emotion without strategy would have warned him and cost me everything. Strategy, in that moment, was an act of love toward myself. It was the most ferocious form of self-care I have ever practiced. Fourth, and this is the one I mean most, whatever you are facing right now, whatever version of the stripped account, the empty promises, the carefully constructed betrayal you are living through, the thing about you that made you a target is also, very often, the thing that will save you. Your carefulness. Your capacity for loyalty. Your willingness to build something slowly, over years, with discipline and intention. He built his deception on those qualities of mine. I built my recovery on the same ones. The house is still standing. The light is still amber. Francis has now successfully dismembered the chew toy and is looking at me with enormous satisfaction. I know exactly how he feels. A final word to the women who saved their own lives. I want to close with something I've been sitting with for a while, and I hope it lands the way I intend it. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from being a competent person who is also being slowly undermined. It's not the exhaustion of working too hard, it's the exhaustion of working hard and then discovering that the ground beneath the work has been quietly removed. That the foundation you were building on was already being sold. I was exhausted in that way for a long time, without knowing it. When I finally understood what had been done to me, part of what I felt, underneath the rage and the grief, was a kind of strange relief. Because exhaustion without a known cause is just suffering. Exhaustion with a cause is a problem. And problems, I know how to handle. If you have been exhausted without knowing why, I want you to look carefully at the ground beneath your feet. Not with paranoia. Not with suspicion of everyone who loves you. But with the same careful, methodical attention you would bring to any other system that might have a leak. Because your armor, babe, no one touches that. Not without consequences. Not without consequences. If any part of this story stayed with you, if it felt familiar, or gave you something to think about, or made you want to call someone you love and hold them a little tighter, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below. Tell me your own story, or tell me how this one made you feel. Every voice in that comment section is part of a conversation that matters. If you found this channel today for the first time, welcome. We tell real stories here. We don't sand down the difficult parts. If that's something you want more of, hit subscribe and hit the bell, because I promise you, there are more stories where this one came from. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, a friend, a sister, a colleague who's been quietly erased by someone who was supposed to protect them, share this with them. Sometimes the most important thing someone can hear is simply, "I see you. I believe you. You are not done." Until next time, take care of yourselves. And check your accounts.